Joining us now as part of the From Oslo to Sovereignty conference, together with the Sovereignty Movement and Arutz is Yoram Ettinger, former ambassador, specialist on Israel, U.S. relations, and the Middle East affairs. Shalom, Yoram.
Shalom, shalom.
So today, as we're talking about sovereignty and the issue of Saudi Arabia as becoming more something of a reality, what's going to happen exactly? Only time will tell. But the big question is the price. Will the price for some sort of normalization with Saudi Arabia be to put aside, again, one would say, after the Abraham Accords, the dream, the vision of sovereignty?
In order to understand the room of maneuverability for Israel, we have to realize that the negotiation with Saudi Arabia take place in the Middle East, not in North America, not in West Europe, but in the volcanic Middle East, which has features going back 1400 years of unpredictability, shifty reality, high-level fragmentation, violence, intolerance, and maybe most importantly, all regimes in the Arab Middle East do not rise to power through the ballot, but through the bullet. And as such, they are very, very tenuous. Shifty regimes have been the reality in Egypt, in Iran, in Libya, in Lebanon, in Syria, throughout the Middle East. Shifty regimes or tenuous regimes means also tenuous policies. And tenuous policies mean also tenuous accords. And I mention that because while some people assume wrongly that peace accord is a major tenet of countries' national security, in the Middle East, the tenuous reality of the Middle East, peace accord is extremely important for the growth of the country, but not as a major element of national security.
So you're also emphasizing here that basically we may sign normalization with one leadership, but then quickly another leadership comes in and then it becomes what? Irrelevant even?
Well, we can go back to Iran. There was the Shah of Iran, who was the American policeman of the Gulf, and overnight, February 1st, the regime changed in Iran from the Shah to the anti-American Ayatollahs, and we have now, for the last 43 years, anti-American regime which proliferate anti-American terrorism, drug trafficking, and proliferation of ballistic technologies. We had before King Hussein of Jordan, a relative moderate, but during 68 to 70, he allowed the PLO to terrorize Israel. During 1990, the invasion of Saddam Hussein to Kuwait, King Hussein was the only Arab leader siding with Saddam Hussein due to constraints inside Jordan and outside Jordan. And therefore, to assume that relations with one Arab regime suggest long-term continuity could be a reckless decision.
But we'll talk about the prices in a moment. You're not saying that it's not an important effort. What we saw in Abraham Accords, what we may be seeing in terms of Saudi Arabia, and again, we'll talk about the price in a moment. But it's an important effort, you're saying, right?
The Abraham Accord, any peace accord with Arabs is extremely important for the growth of Israel, for its international and regional position. But it must not replace fundamental tenets of national security. You cannot exchange national security from the Judea and Samaria front with peace accord with Saudi Arabia. Peace accord with Saudi Arabia serves fundamental, critical Saudi interests. They do not approach Israel because they finally are convinced that Israel sincerely is pursuing peace. They approach Israel because they regard Israel as a very critical, not just another partner, but a critical partner in their attempt to face off national security threats as well as economic challenges. They do not trust the Americans as long-term allies in view of America's cuddling the Ayatollahs of Iran and pressuring the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Egyptians. However, they do trust Israel as the only reliable regional ally which they have right now in face of Iran's Ayatollahs, in face of the Muslim Brotherhood. And
so why are we seeing the Palestinian issue being raised again and again, despite what you're saying about the strategy and what's important to which part?
Well, first and foremost, because of Israel. You have in Israel elements that generated the Oslo Accord, haven't given up on Oslo Accord, and at the same time we have the US State Department, which firmly believes or deludes itself that the Palestinian issue is the crux of the Arab-Israeli conflict, notwithstanding or in defiance of the reality of the Abraham Accords. They believe that the Palestinian issue is a core cause of Middle East turbulence and a crown jewel of Arab policymakers. We have to make a distinction between very, very pro-Palestinian Saudi talk and the very indifferent to negative Saudi walk towards the Palestinians. The Saudis have served as the major engine behind Israel's peace accord with the UAE, Bahrain, and probably Morocco as well. But they never preconditioned it upon establishing a Palestinian state. The Saudis never flexed a military muscle on behalf of the Palestinians, barely financial muscle, barely diplomatic muscle. And they have not flexed that muscle because the Saudis, unlike too many Israelis, unlike the State Department, are aware of the Palestinian track record in the intra-Arab sphere. Namely, the Saudis, just like all Arab countries, consider the Palestinians to be role model of subversion, of terrorism, of ingratitude, of treachery. And therefore, they have never attempted to establish a Palestinian state because from their point of view, a Palestinian state would add fuel to the fire in the Middle East, threatening their own regime.
So that brings us to the second element that is here, and that's the American pressure. And do you think that Israel has anything to do to change this pressure, or Israel has to wait till the Republicans get back into power?
Well, first of all, I think we have to change the music. For an Israeli official or an Israeli who comes to Washington or to the US and talk about the importance of Judea and Samaria as a cradle of Jewish history and religion and culture, as a prerequisite for Israel's national security, is next to waste of time. When you address American audience in Washington or throughout the US, you have to address what's in it for America. And therefore, the theme in my mind for Israelis in the US should be the importance, the contribution of Israel's control of the mountain ridges of Judea, Samaria, to America's own interest in the Middle East, and at the same time to highlight the fact that a Palestinian state in Judea, Samaria would doom the pro-US Hashemite regime in Jordan, would transform Jordan into another uncontrollable state in the mold of Libya and Syria and Lebanon and Iraq and Yemen, and that would be heaven, paradise for the Ayatollahs of Iran, for anti-US Islamic terrorists, that would create ripple effects into the Arabian Peninsula, which could bring calamity to the economy of many Western powers, including the US, with the impact on the supply of oil from the Persian Gulf. And therefore, it is there is a way to enhance our performance in the US, but it requires not only changing in music, but also changing the priorities. The executive in the US, President, Secretary of State, are very important. But the chance of changing their view is anywhere from zilch to none. On the other hand, there is another branch of government, the legislature, which is co-equal and co-determining under the US Constitution, which is mostly open-minded, Democrats and Republicans alike. It is incumbent upon Israelis who come to Washington to spend more time, not equal time, more time on Capitol Hill than visiting different executive offices for the sake of Israel's national security.
Okay, former Ambassador Yoram Ettinger, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.